Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive.
Always exciting to be here.
So today, we're taking a look at Atomic Habits
Ah, yes. A classic.
by James Clear.
That's right.
You know, I was thinking, just starting out, what really grabbed my attention was that whole idea of building habits is less about having something, like the results,
Yeah.
and more about becoming a certain type of person.
Yeah, it's a real shift in thinking, isn't it?
It is. It's instead of focusing on the outcome.
It's about who you're becoming along the way.
Yeah. It's a journey, right?
Totally. So, how do those small changes lead to those big outcomes?
Right.
Clear talks about this plateau of latent potential, and he uses this ice analogy, which I just love.
Oh, yeah, the ice cube.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine you're, slowly heating up an ice cube.
Mm-hmm.
For a while, nothing seems to be happening.
Right.
But then, bam! At 32 degrees, it melts.
It's a great way to visualize it because it really is like that, you know?
Put in the work, you put in the work, you put in the work, and then suddenly...
That's boom.
Yeah, the breakthrough happens.
It's like all those overnight successes we hear about, they're not really overnight, are they?
Not at all.
Oh,
yeah,
no.
It's years of work, usually.
Exactly. It's all that effort, that daily stuff, all coming together.
The compound effect, right?
Yes. So, speaking of that daily stuff, one of the things I loved was the concept of every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you want to become.
I love that analogy.
It makes it so clear.
It really does.
If I want to be a writer, I need to write every day.
And every time you write, you're casting a vote for that identity.
It's proof.
Yeah. You're not just trying to be a writer, you're actually becoming one.
You're doing it.
That's it.
It's okay, if you want to be a runner,
Mm-hmm.
you got to run. Put on those shoes, get out there.
Just those small steps.
Yeah, and it's that consistency that builds over time.
It's the compound effect again.
Yes. So we're casting votes, we're melting ice. I'm loving this. But how do habits actually work? What's the mechanics of this?
Yeah, how do they actually function?
Clear breaks it down into this 4-stage loop, and it just made it so clear for me, cue, craving, response, reward.
Oh, it's such a simple framework.
Yeah.
But so powerful.
It's so powerful, and it makes it easy to understand.
Think about a green traffic light, right? That's your cue.
Yeah.
And it triggers this prediction, if I hit the gas, I'll get closer to my destination.
Yeah.
And that's your craving.
Okay.
So you press the gas pedal, that's your response.
Okay.
And then you get closer to where you want to go, and that's your reward.
I love that. That makes it so much easier.
It's happening all the time.
Yeah, it's happening constantly.
Without us even realizing it.
Yeah. So how do we break out of a bad habit loop? Or create a new one for something that we do want?
Yeah, how do we change those patterns? Well, it starts with awareness.
Awareness.
You can't change something you're not even aware of, right? So you start by noticing your habits. When do they happen?
Oh.
What triggers them? What's the reward you're getting from it?
Okay, so noticing those things and becoming more aware.
Yeah, shining a light on them.
He has these great techniques like pointing and calling, and I know it sounds so silly.
I know, it sounds funny, right?
But I tried it while making coffee the other day.
Did you really?
Yeah, I was reaching for the mug, scooping the coffee, pouring the water.
So you're narrating your actions.
Yeah, I was oh, this is what I do.
It pulls you out of that autopilot mode.
Yes, it makes you so much more aware of each step.
Exactly.
Okay, so one of the other things that really stuck with me was this idea of implementation intentions.
Oh, yes.
He talked about this study
Mm-hmm.
where they divided people into groups to see who would exercise more, and the group that really specifically planned
Yeah.
when and where they would exercise, they followed through so much more.
It's about making it concrete. Right. Instead of just saying, oh, I want to exercise more.
It's I will exercise at this time, at this place.
Exactly.
On these days.
Remove all the guesswork.
Make it a plan.
He gives this great formula for crafting an implementation intention, and I actually wrote it down.
Oh, excellent.
During the next week, I will partake in at least 20 minutes of blank behavior on blank day at blank time in blank place.
I love that.
So specific.
It takes all the thinking out of it.
Yeah. And it just makes it so much more likely that you'll actually do it.
You're removing those barriers.
And this is making me think about how much our environment plays into all of this.
Oh, absolutely.
Remember that study about the urinal fly stickers?
Oh, yes, the fly in the urinal.
I know it sounds crazy, but they reduce spillage by 80%.
It's amazing,
Just
right?
by putting this little fly sticker in the urinal.
It just changes behavior.
So it's like even these tiny little changes in our environment can make a big difference.
It's about making the desired action
Yeah.
the most obvious choice.
Yeah.
The easiest choice.
The path of least resistance.
So I was thinking, if I want to drink more water, maybe I should keep a full glass on my desk all the time.
I love it.
So it's right there.
It's there, it's ready, it's tempting.
Easy choice.
Exactly. And the same principle applies to breaking bad habits, right?
Yes.
Want to spend less time on social media? Delete the apps.
Okay.
You're making it harder to engage in that behavior.
Increasing that friction.
Exactly.
You know, all this talk about making things easier, there's another strategy I wanted to bring up, the 2-minute rule.
Oh, yes, a classic.
I love it. When you're starting a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
Make it super simple.
So it's like, instead of trying to run a marathon.
Just put on your running shoes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Or instead of, like, writing a whole chapter,
Yeah.
just commit to writing for 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes. Get started.
It's like tricking your brain to get going.
It's that initial momentum.
Yeah. You're like, oh, I can do this.
And often once you start, you'll keep going.
You're in it.
That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and it's not so overwhelming.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about making it easy. Now how about repetition?
Oh, repetition is key.
He calls this like the third law of behavior change, make it easy, and he uses the habit line.
Oh, yeah. I love the habit line.
Yeah, it illustrates how the more we do something, the more it becomes ingrained in our brain.
It's like building a groove in a record.
And neuroscientists call it long-term potentiation, which basically means neurons that fire together wire together.
It's fascinating how our brains work, isn't it?
It really is. You know, thinking about that makes me realize all those times I've, like, given up on a new habit because I wasn't seeing results fast enough.
Oh, I've been there.
It's that consistency, that repetition.
It's about showing up even when you don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Even when it's hard.
So it's not about perfection. It's about doing it.
Absolutely. Consistency over perfection.
Okay, so we talked about making it easy, repeating it. What about making it attractive?
Ooh, yes. This is where things get fun.
Yeah. This is the second law of behavior change, make it attractive.
And one of my favorite techniques here is temptation bundling.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's about pairing something you want to do with something you need to do.
Okay.
So, for example, only allowing yourself to watch your favorite show while on the treadmill.
Ooh, I like that.
Right. Or listening to a podcast you love while doing chores.
It's like bribing yourself with something enjoyable.
Exactly. It's a clever way to hack your motivation.
Genius.
Our brains release dopamine when we anticipate something pleasurable.
So if you link that pleasurable thing to something that's maybe not as enjoyable, you're more likely to do it.
Exactly. You're leveraging your brain's reward system.
I love that. So we've got awareness, repetition, we've got our environment working for us, and we're bribing ourselves with temptation bundles.
We're on a roll.
What else can we do to make sure those habits really stick?
That's a great question.
And I think, like, one of the things that always gets in the way is that our brains really prefer immediate rewards.
Oh, absolutely. We're wired for instant gratification.
Yeah. Clear talks about this in terms of the cardinal rule of behavior change. What is immediately rewarded is repeated. What is immediately punished is avoided.
It explains so much about human behavior.
It does. It makes sense why it's hard to stick with habits where you don't see the benefit right away.
Like eating healthy
Yeah.
or saving money
Yeah. The benefits are long-term, but the temptation to indulge.
is right there in the moment. It's a constant battle.
Okay, so how do we turn that instant gratification to our advantage?
Well, one way is through habit tracking.
Oh,
Using a habit tracker app or just a simple calendar to mark off each day you successfully complete your habit can be surprisingly motivating.
I've tried that before, but I often forget to track it.
That's why it's important to make it visual and obvious.
Okay.
Remember the example of moving paper clips to track sales calls?
Yeah.
That physical act of moving something from one jar to another?
It makes it real.
It can be really powerful.
So it's like turning it into a game, almost.
It is. It's gamifying the process.
And it gives you that visual representation of your progress.
Exactly. And each time you mark off your habit, you're reinforcing that behavior.
Right.
You're building that evidence of your success.
So it's a way to reward yourself for the process, even if the ultimate reward is still a ways off.
Precisely. You're celebrating the small wins along the way.
I love that.
And that can make all the difference.
And, this is making me think about accountability, too.
Oh, accountability is huge.
It really is.
It's why things like seatbelt laws and speeding tickets are so effective.
Oh, yeah?
They create an immediate cost for bad habits.
It's true.
Makes you think twice.
And Clear talks about using habit contracts to do the same thing in our own lives.
It's brilliant, right?
It is. Setting those clear consequences for yourself.
Yes.
I love that story about Brian Harris, the entrepreneur who used a habit contract for weight loss.
Oh, yeah, the Alabama hat story.
He had to wear an Alabama hat if he missed his goals.
It's so funny.
But it works.
It creates that extra motivation.
Yeah. Before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive, there's one last idea I want to touch on, the explore-exploit trade-off.
Oh, yes. A fascinating concept.
I'm still kind of wrapping my head around it.
It's about finding that balance between exploring different options and exploiting the ones that work best for you.
So it's like trying different things until you find something that clicks.
Exactly. And then focusing your energy on that winning formula.
All right.
It's like finding your sweet spot.
I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together, like how we can create this system
It's all connected.
for building habits that actually stick.
It's a system for success.
I love it. So much to think about.
It's powerful stuff.
I'm excited to keep going.
Me too.
This is great.
Let's dive back in. It's kind of like, how can we use this idea of systems, to make good habits like inevitable and bad habits like almost impossible?
Yeah. And he gives this great example about the history of the cash register.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
Like back in the day, shop owners kept their money in an open drawer.
Makes it pretty easy to skim a little.
Yeah, totally.
But then the cash register came along, made it harder to steal.
Okay, so like automating ethical behavior
Exactly.
instead of relying on willpower,
Yeah.
you're changing the system.
You're designing your environment
Yeah.
to make the right choice, the easy choice.
Yeah.
And he gives all these examples of things you can do, like one-time actions that have a ripple effect on your habits.
Okay.
Like if you want to eat less, use smaller plates.
Ooh.
Right. Want to sleep better? Blackout curtains?
So it's like setting yourself up for success
Exactly. You're making it easy on yourself.
without having to think about it every day.
It's about being proactive.
This reminds me of how we were talking about repetition and making things easier.
Right.
But sometimes it's not about making good habits easier. It's about making bad habits harder.
Ooh. Yeah. Making it difficult.
He calls this the inversion of the third law of behavior change.
Flip it around.
He tells that story about Victor Hugo, who locked away all his clothes to force himself to write.
Extreme but effective, right?
Yeah.
That's a commitment device.
Yeah.
A choice you make now to control your actions later.
So I do something similar with my phone.
Oh, tell me about it.
If I'm trying to focus, I'll put it in another room or turn it off completely.
You're removing the temptation.
Yeah.
I love it. It's like
Yeah.
out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah. And it's just, it removes that constant pull to check it.
It's so easy to get sucked in.
It really is. And there are so many ways to do this.
Oh, tons.
If you want to reduce mindless snacking, buy single serving packs instead of the giant bag.
Portion control.
Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Or curb social media use.
Yeah.
Delete the apps from your phone.
At least for part of the day.
Yeah. Create those boundaries.
It's all about increasing the friction.
Yeah.
Making those bad habits less appealing.
It's amazing how even a little bit of friction can make such a big difference.
It really can.
Clear talks about how he drinks less beer when it's hidden away in the back of the fridge.
Out of sight, out of mind again.
But it's not that he can't reach it. It's just that tiny bit of extra effort
That makes all the difference.
makes him less likely to grab one.
It's fascinating how our environment shapes our choices.
It really is. And it makes me think about technology and how it can be this double-edged sword.
It's a tool, right?
Yeah.
It can be used for good or for evil.
On one hand, it can automate good habits, like automatic savings deposits.
Right. Or reminders to take your medication.
But then it can also, really make bad habits easy.
Oh, yeah, like binge watching shows.
Or endlessly scrolling.
The scroll hole is real.
Well, it's about, being mindful of how we're using it.
And designing our digital environment to support our goals.
Yeah, almost decluttering your digital space, just like you would your physical space.
I love that analogy.
Like unsubscribing from email lists you never read, muting those accounts on social media that just stress you out,
Curating your online experience.
setting screen time limits.
It all helps.
And speaking of things adding up, I think one of the biggest challenges with all this is that our brains just love instant gratification.
We're wired that way.
Yeah, it's that cardinal rule of behavior change all over again.
It's hard to resist.
It's hard. Like,
Yeah.
it makes sense why it's so hard to stick with habits where you don't see that payoff right away.
It's tough.
Especially because, for most of human history, we lived in immediate return environments.
Our ancestors had to focus on immediate needs.
Finding food, shelter.
Survival mode.
Yeah. But now, so much of what we want to achieve requires delaying gratification.
It's a whole different ballgame.
Like saving for retirement.
Investing in your education.
Building long-term relationships.
It takes patience.
Okay, so how do we bridge that gap then? Between that desire for instant gratification and those long-term things we want to achieve?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
It is.
Well, one strategy is to find ways to make the process itself more rewarding. Remember how we were talking about habit tracking?
Yeah.
That sense of accomplishment you get from marking off your habit, it can be really motivating.
I love that, like celebrating those little wins along the way.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Yeah.
Even simple things, like making your bed in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Or clearing your desk at the end of the day.
Okay.
It creates a sense of order and accomplishment.
And Clear talks about, that feeling of success being a signal that the effort was worth it.
It reinforces the behavior. It creates that positive feedback loop.
I like that.
Another powerful strategy is to find ways to make doing nothing enjoyable.
Doing nothing. I'm not sure I follow.
I know it sounds counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But think about it this way. If you want to watch less TV,
Okay.
make the act of not watching TV more enjoyable.
Okay.
Create a cozy reading nook.
Oh.
Take a relaxing bath.
Yeah.
Go for a wank in nature.
So you're reframing it.
Exactly. It's about finding those alternative activities that bring you joy.
I like that.
It's about filling your time with things that nourish you.
So it's not just about checking things off a list. It's about creating a life that feels good,
It's about designing a life you love.
that aligns with your values and your desires.
That's what it's all about.
And this makes me think about that idea of reflection, which Clear talks about too.
Reflection is so important.
He mentions that system used by the Los Angeles Lakers,
Oh, yeah, the Career Best Effort program.
where they track and analyze their performance.
In meticulous detail.
So it's not just about setting goals, it's about constantly evaluating and adjusting.
It's about continuous improvement.
And you don't have to be a professional athlete to do this.
Not at all.
Like incorporating some kind of reflection practice,
Journaling.
weekly reviews.
Just taking a few minutes each day to reflect.
It's like taking stock of your habits
Exactly. Seeing what's working, what's not.
and making adjustments.
It's all about optimization.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is just being honest with yourself.
Honesty is key.
It's easy to, make excuses or rationalize our behavior.
We're good at that.
But without that honest self-assessment, it's hard to make real progress.
You have to be willing to face the truth.
Okay, so we've talked about reflection, rewarding ourselves, making our environment work for us. What about motivation?
Motivation, the elusive beast.
It really is. How do you stay motivated when you inevitably hit those slumps?
Clear says something really interesting about this. He says highly successful people actually feel the same lack of motivation as everyone else.
Yeah.
The difference is they show up and do the work anyway.
So it's not about always feeling motivated.
Yeah, it's about discipline.
It's about doing it even when you don't feel like it.
That's the key.
And he talks about this in the context of mastery.
Right. As we get better at something, it can become more routine.
And maybe, less exciting.
Yeah, we can lose that initial spark.
But true mastery requires pushing through that, right?
Absolutely. You have to keep practicing, even when it's boring.
And he suggests a few ways to, combat that boredom.
Like what?
Like variable rewards.
Oh, yeah. It's a good one.
Think about, slot machines
They get you hooked.
with those unpredictable rewards.
The excitement of not knowing what you're going to get.
So it's about adding an element of surprise
And unpredictability.
to your habits.
It can make things more engaging.
I like that. It's like turning your habits into a game.
Gamification at its finest.
So we're tricking ourselves with temptation bundles, rewarding ourselves, and now adding in variable rewards.
It's all part of the plan.
This is really making me rethink how I approach this whole habit thing.
It's a journey, right?
It is, and I think at the end of the day, it's about accepting that there will be times when you just don't feel motivated.
That's part of the process.
Clear says stepping up when it's annoying or painful or draining to do so, that's what makes the difference between a professional and an amateur.
That's a powerful statement.
It really is. So as we kind of wrap up this part of our deep dive, what are some of your key takeaways?
Well, for me, it's that building good habits is an ongoing process, not a destination.
Okay.
It's about making those small, consistent changes over time.
And like understanding the science behind it.
Yes, the 4-stage loop, the role of dopamine.
Repetition, reward.
It's all connected.
And being intentional about our environment too, right?
Absolutely. Creating those obvious cues, reducing friction for good habits, increasing it for bad habits.
It's all about making it work for you.
And finding the strategies that work best for you.
Whether it's habit stacking,
temptation bundling,
accountability partners.
It's about experimenting and finding what resonates with you.
This has been so insightful.
It's been a pleasure.
I'm already thinking about my own habits in a whole new way.
That's fantastic.
And remember, it's progress, not perfection.
That's the mantra.
Just keep taking those small steps forward.
You'll be amazed at what you can achieve.
You know, there's one last idea from the book that really got me thinking.
Oh, tell me more.
This idea that happiness isn't something we achieve, but something that ensues.
That's interesting.
I know. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah, unpack that for me.
Clear argues that happiness is essentially the space between one desire being fulfilled and a new desire forming.
So it's like this fleeting state, because as soon as we achieve one thing, we're on to the next.
Right. But that doesn't mean we can't experience happiness and fulfillment along the way.
Absolutely. We can savor those moments.
And I think it ties back to this idea that building better habits is about becoming the kind of person who experiences more of those moments.
It's about aligning our actions with our values.
Yeah. And creating a life that feels meaningful.
A life that feels good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's a journey worth taking, even if happiness is always, like, just around the corner.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
You know, this whole idea that happiness ensues from our actions, like it's not something we achieve, but something that happens along the way, it really has me thinking.
It's a different way of looking at it, right? Instead of chasing happiness, we're creating the conditions for it to just show up.
Yeah, and it kind of makes me think about the power of focusing on the process, not just the outcome.
It's like if we're always striving for that future happiness, we might miss the joy in what we're doing right now.
Isn't that what building these better habits is all about? Like creating a life that feels good, a life that, you know, matches our values and what we really want deep down.
It's about designing a life that makes those moments of happiness, those moments of fulfillment, more likely to happen.
Yeah. Even if, you know, happiness itself always feels a little bit out of reach.
It's like you're building this beautiful garden, right? You create the conditions, you plant the seeds, you nurture everything.
And then the flowers just bloom naturally.
Exactly.
You know, this makes me think about something else we talked about earlier, about how our habits are like a reflection of our identity.
Yeah, it's like our habits aren't just things we do.
It's who we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like they're part of us.
If we want to change our habits, we have to shift how we see ourselves.
It's a deeper level change, for sure.
It's like we're casting votes all the time for the kind of person we want to be, you know? And our habits are the votes.
I love that.
If you want to be a writer, write every day.
Exactly.
If you want to be healthier, make those healthy choices consistently.
And each time you do it, it reinforces that identity.
Until it's not even a struggle anymore.
It just becomes who you are.
And that's where those small changes, the tiny improvements come in.
The 1% better every day.
It doesn't have to be this big, massive overnight thing.
Small steps, consistency.
And, you know, those small changes can lead to big results.
It's the compound effect.
Yeah.
Like investing a small amount of money consistently over time.
You get that compound interest.
It grows and grows.
So it's about trusting that process even when you're not seeing results right away.
Trust the journey.
Because those small changes are building momentum.
They're creating those neural pathways.
Solidifying that identity.
You're becoming that person.
It all comes back to that plateau of latent potential.
That ice cube.
Slowly melting.
Until, bam, breakthrough.
This has been incredible.
It's been so much fun.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of my habits.
I'm glad to hear that.
Any final thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up this deep dive?
As we finish up here with Atomic Habits, I think the biggest takeaway is this. Change is possible. It doesn't have to be overwhelming, you know?
Small steps.
It can be as simple as one tiny change, one tiny vote for the person you want to become.
I love that.
What's one small habit you can commit to today that brings you closer to that vision you have for yourself?
I love that question.
Think about that, and remember, even those small changes, when you do them consistently, can make a huge impact on your life.
Beautifully said. A huge thanks to you for joining us and sharing all your wisdom and insights.
It's been a pleasure being here.
To all of you listening, we encourage you to check out Atomic Habits for yourselves and discover just how powerful those small changes can be.
Happy habit building, everyone.
Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.